Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for May 12, 2014. We'll begin with the special order calendar, decision items. Item number 1, 17707BZ, 886 Glenmore Avenue, Brooklyn.
Any questions or comments? We weren't waiting for anything?
No.
Okay.
Item number 2, 371 and 37203BZ, 663 and 655 Fifth Avenue, Manhattan.
Any questions or comments? We weren't waiting for anything on this case either.
Continued hearing items. Item number 3, 45756BZ, 152 154 India Street, Brooklyn.
The applicant made a submission. They provided us with photographs showing the removal of the barbed wire. I think Commissioner Otley Brown had asked for that. There were some questions about the adjacent use. Commissioner Hinkson?
Yes, I know that they said that they're working on correcting the CO, but either I guess they need to correct the CO or amend their application to say exactly what that building is that's adjacent to them.
Right. It seems they have a sign that talks about monthly parking, and it just isn't clear whether the parking is actually being rented by people in the neighborhood, which I don't personally have an issue with if that's the way that's functioning, but maybe they can clarify that. Other comments or questions? Yes?
They did remove the barbed wire, but it looks as if the framework for it is still there. So if they could just address that, the framework should be removed as well.
Okay. Any other comments? All right.
Item number 4, 24-96BZ, 213 Madison Street, Manhattan.
The applicant's asked for an adjournment.
Item number 5, 16000BZ, 244-04 Francis Lewis Boulevard, Queens.
The applicant made a submission. Commissioner Martinez, I know you had raised some issues.
Right. It appears that they have 3 vacuums and a coin-operated auto laundry along that property line. And my concern, well, the adjacent use is not residential,
Okay.
so, it's commercial, so I wasn't concerned about interfering with the adjacent use as much as, and I think the community board referenced this also, that it interferes with the parking. I think that area is supposed to be for 4 parking spaces, so if they could actually scale out the parking spaces and all the equipment that's there to show that it doesn't interfere with the curb cut and that they have adequate room.
Okay. Any other comments?
Oh, also,
Yes.
there's a strip of landscaping behind the vacuums, which is, needs to be refurbished.
Okay.
New cases, item number 6, 75178BZ, 200-15 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
Questions and comments on this case?
They talk about businesses being open till 9 p.m. Along the street, and if they could give us maybe a little more information on that, maybe a list of the businesses, so that just beef up their
Right, because they're actually changing their hours from what was previously approved. We can ask them to do that to actually identify hours of other businesses along the area. Other questions or comments?
Maybe they could give us some photos of the storage container for the tires they're constructing.
Right, I had a concern about that because they said that they're going to construct something. If they're actually constructing a building of some sort, like an enlargement, first of all, they don't have permission to do it, so they should seek it from us. But strictly speaking, just as per the statute, if they've already asked for the change of use, which I believe they did from a gas station to auto repair, I believe they cannot seek an enlargement. So they really need to look at what they're doing and explain to us. They can't really enlarge the building and incorporate the storage within the building. What they should try and do, I know it's a lot of tires, they should actually look to see if they can put that within the existing building. Yes, Commissioner.
The site looks kind of cluttered to be able to fit something else on there. There's already a storage container on there that's.
You mean already current? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was wondering what additional space do they have that they could even put another one on there?
Okay.
There's also a clothing donation bin. I'm not sure if that's on their property or not.
Okay.
Item number 7.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. All right, yes.
Item number 7, 27886BZ, 1677 Bruckner Boulevard, the Bronx.
All right, this is for White Castle. I just want to note the community board is going to be reviewing this again, I believe, on the 12th. Initially, when this was referred out to them, it was just more about continuing the existing use on the site and abandoning the grant that we gave them in 2012. But subsequent to that, working with our examiner, they identified that this was actually an amendment to the plans, so it's gone back to the community board. The amendment is very small. It's really just enlarging the drive-through windows. Yes, comments and questions?
I just think it's probably a typo, but on page 9 of the statement, it says that the menu board speaker will continue to be located 100.5 inches from the nearest residential area. That's about 8 feet. I think it's actually farther than that, so.
Okay, all right, so maybe they mean something else, not inches. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Appeals calendar, I'm sorry. Appeals calendar, decision items, item number 8, 43-14A, 242 West 76th Street, Manhattan.
All right, any issues with this? Okay.
Continued hearing items, item number 9, 26607A, 1602 to 1610 Avenue S, Brooklyn.
Any questions and comments on this case? They made a submission.
They cleaned up the site?
They cleaned up the site. They identified and showed us that Buildings Department actually required them to do the backfill.
Correct.
Any concerns?
I had asked for there to be some evidence of the financing, which they claim they have, and I actually found the letter to be really kind of inadequate. We are confident we can contribute. We'll be on the investment side. It just seemed all quite nebulous to me.
Right. I know that we've seen many cases before us where we haven't asked for this kind of
Right.
information. I know your concern is that it's been fallow for a long time.
It is.
Well,
And
excuse me.
it's, you know, they raised the issue. The applicant said that the issue of financing, which had been a concern in the past, I guess they're trying to give us some assurance that this thing will actually get built. So they said the financing question was resolved, and I kind of find this to be inadequate.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns? All right.
Zoning calendar, decision items, item number 1, 263-12BZ and 264-12A, 232 and 222 City Island, the Bronx.
We had closed this hearing, and we received a late submission from the applicant, and I recommend that we reopen the hearing based on the new evidence and drawings that they've given us. I know that the community board is aware of this. They've asked us to postpone any reopening till after they meet, which is on May 15th. So if the board members have no issues, we can postpone the reopening of this hearing till May 20th, which will allow the community board to review it this week. But I recommend reopening this because the project has really been scaled down further. And I think they've taken some direction from this board about what would be an FAR and a scale that would be acceptable to this board, and that would be much more consistent with the character of City Island. You all may recall that we had grave concerns about this project, and it has changed over the past several months. In their last iteration, I think the board was still not pleased with what they were proposing. And at that time, the applicant said, well, this is what we need, and I think the board said we'd close the hearing. They have come back with a proposal which is now at 0.6 FAR. I think the board recognizes that 0.6 FAR is a density or a square footage that is allowed in R3X, R3A, R32 districts. And while usually the 0.1 FAR is in the attic or under a sloped roof, in this particular case, actually, the third floor that they're proposing is, I think, in design treated like an attic or a roof because it's slanted. So I think that in spirit, I think it tries to meet the character of R32s. Now, this is a multiple dwelling, and the districts adjacent to it actually allows 1 or 2 family homes. I think there's an argument to be made here that a multiple dwelling would work because, in fact, it addresses some of the constraints of the site. As you know, they've identified issues of contamination as well as soil conditions, and the more homes you have that are in small plots of land actually increases the cost of construction. So the idea of consolidating it, I think, makes sense and helps to meet their minimum variance. They're proposing now 45 units, which is a significant difference from what was previously or originally proposed. And they brought the height down to 35 feet, which is the height limit in City Island. And finally, they have also, I just want to remind the board members that they had previously withdrawn the building code variance, which I think all board members were skeptical of granting. So the code waiver to deal with the flood hazard area has been withdrawn. All right, comments and questions? Yes, Commissioner?
Well, I feel that they really took our advice last time, because to me, part of what was driving that bulk was the fact that they had all of these spaces that they couldn't derive revenue from. They were just circulation spaces and common spaces, and once they pared that down, they found that they could easily make a smaller development and still have a reasonable return. So I was pleased to see the new proposal.
Okay. Other comments? Any other comments? Okay.
Item number 2, 299-12BZ, 40-56 10th Avenue, Manhattan.
I think we're ready to proceed with decision. We've got all the sign-offs from the other agencies. As you know, this project changed over time. It's now at 5 FAR, and they're just asking for bulk waivers for their building. I know that there's still concerns from the adjacent building regarding the financials, but I think the board has reviewed that, and I think there are adequate responses. I think the cap rates that they've been identifying, which is the applicant, are not out of the range that the board has accepted in the past. Are there any concerns?
No.
Okay.
Item number 3, 252-13BZ, 1221 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
All right, any concerns, issues? Okay.
Item number 4, 253-13BZ, 66-31 Booth Street, Queens.
Any issues with this? All right.
Item number 5, 297-13BZ, 308 Cooper Street, Brooklyn.
We'll defer this case. We're still waiting for DEP sign-off.
Continued hearing items. Item number 6, 347-12BZ, 42-31 Union Street, Queens.
The applicant made a submission. I know we had raised some issues last time, both on the A and the B finding. Just on the A finding, Commissioner Martinez, I know you had some concerns previously.
Right, yes, they gave us additional geotechnical information, and I can understand why they situated their foundation slab 50 feet below grade. And it seems rather well documented in terms of the boulders and the cobbles.
Okay. Are there any other concerns on the A finding? All right, on the B finding, I know we raised several concerns. I think the last iteration of their financial analysis, it seemed to show that the as-of-right scenarios, some of them actually could work. So even though the board recognized that there were some constraints on the site, we were concerned that their financial analysis wasn't actually showing any hardship. They have subsequently revised their analysis and provided explanation. Commissioner, Utley Brown?
Well, there were several things that we asked them to address that they did, and one which they wanted to address that we didn't really request, but they did. And the first thing that they addressed was the cap rate, which they also addressed in the session with us. We thought that it looked as if some of the as-of-right scenarios were working at a cap rate of 5.5, and they wanted to address that issue because they felt that they had made an error in that they didn't properly blend the cap rate by including the fact that there was community facility space and community facility income of a substantial nature in all of those iterations. So they did request the chance to analyze the situation, and they raised the blended cap rate to a 6.5. justifying it by saying that the community facility was a far riskier income stream, and so therefore it should have a higher cap rate of 9, and set against the residential cap rate of 5.5, they pursued a blend based on the percentage of income for each use and arrived at 6.5. If they used the 6.5, it actually made it so that basically the proposal is the only one showing the feasible income stream. They adjusted their land value comparables in response to my comment about the site value being too high because it had land with buildings on it used as comparables instead of straight vacant land. So what they did is they looked at all of the comparables that they had used and even added a few others and showed that each of those properties were really land sales, even though they had buildings on them, because the buildings were demolished almost immediately after the sales date. And so I accept that.
Okay. Were there any other comments on the financials?
Well,
the
they
issues?
do have,
Yeah.
they had a few errors. If you look at their feasibility report, page 8 has the DOB approved residential income being the same as the as-of-right residential, but it really should only be 4 million since there are actually less apartments. On page 9, the condo did not have the seller community facility income added in, so there should be extra income added in for that. And on page 10, the proposed hotel income is $500,000 more than what they state on page 13. Yet for the lesser variance, the hotel income is the same on each of those pages. So there's an error there somewhere. I'm not sure whether it's with
Okay.
the lesser variance or the proposed.
Okay, so they should correct that.
Yes, they should correct it.
Are there any other comments on the financials? All right. I think they also addressed other questions about this hotel use and the unit size or the room size, and I think they gave us some supporting evidence of the kinds of hotels that they're looking to be a tenant here or to take over the space. And we got a letter from, I guess it's, what was the hotel that we got the letter from? Here somewhere. Weston or Starwood Hotel, that talked about the square footage being very much in tune with the kinds of hotels that they build. So I think that addressed at least my concern about how they were getting to the number of units or number of rooms. Yes.
Oh, I also forgot to mention that they also adjusted the hotel comparables by using a different set of hotels that would
Right.
be more like a full-service hotel.
Exactly, right. I know you had raised that issue as well. Are there other comments or questions? They did speak to the issue of work that was done after hours, and they provided evidence that, in fact, they sought variances from the buildings department for overtime hours for construction. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. I just had one concern, and I guess two issues. One is that I think it would be helpful in their statement of facts and findings to clearly provide us, especially under the A finding, the scenarios that they've analyzed in terms of the square footages, what are the differences between each case, and really make a statement as to why particularly the as-of-right scenarios don't work. I just want to remind applicants that the A finding is not just identifying all the characteristics of the site that are unique, but also explaining why complying and conforming developments don't work. And in order to really explain that, you have to identify what it is that you're analyzing. So I think it would make the papers much stronger if they could just go through that analysis in their narrative as well. They talk about a little bit in their in the B finding, but it really should also be addressed in the A finding. Yes, other comments? Okay.
Item number 7, 210-13BZ, 43-12 50th Street, Queens.
The applicant has asked for an adjournment.
Item number 8, 216 and 217, 13BZ and A, 750 Barclay Avenue, Staten Island.
The applicant has revised their proposal. I think it's much better. I think they're asking for the square footage that was initially approved by this board for a portion of the site, and they brought down the height, as a result of the lesser FAR, they brought down the height of the building as well. And a building of this size would generate I believe, 16 parking spaces, and they're providing 24 spaces unattended, and when they're attended, probably during weekends, it can increase the
43.
capacity to
attended.
43.
Right.
All right, questions and comments on this case?
No, I just think they were very responsive to the issues raised at the first hearing, as well as those raised by the borough president, with regard to the signage and the size and parking. I just think it's very responsive.
I think what would be helpful, though, just on their A finding, and I know that I had raised this last time around, that their A finding rests on, I think, 2 or 3 points. One is the history of development, and it is clear that portion of the lot was approved for commercial use by this board. The other portion of the lot, which was vacant, their argument is that it's always been used for parking. I think that's not a good enough response to why there's a hardship on the site, that it was all traditionally used as parking. Lots of sites are used traditionally as parking, and they can be redeveloped, so I didn't buy that. But they also talk about the GCL, or the map street. But in fairness to them, they did analyze a scenario where the GCL would be granted by the board and it gets you 4 homes. I think what would be helpful to us is if they could just incorporate 2 other issues that I think would support their case. One is that these lots, the balance of the site, which is about 7,000 square feet, which they've incorporated, I think illegally, but at this point want to legalize for parking. I think they should speak to those lots themselves. They tend to be narrow, they're through lots, which raises certain issues about where you put your front yard and your rear yard. And as a result of Hurricane Sandy and new rules, particularly in this particular case where it's vacant, that really building under the new rules can be cost prohibitive unless you have a sort of minimum number of units to carry those costs. In this particular case, it's about $300,000 additional just for those kind of measures. And when you carry that between 4 homes, you're really talking about each carrying $78,000 additional, and that's hard to offset with the revenue that's generated. So if they could just put that into their A finding and perhaps just speak to the fact that the neighborhood otherwise is fairly developed and was not developed with these rules, and so this would be one of few sites in the area that really have to comply with the new rules. Does that seem reasonable? I think it would just strengthen the A finding. Yes, Commissioner, you want to say something? Yes.
No, I agree with what you said. I was just going to address the question that I gave on the B finding
Yes.
concerning a new scenario in which they would sell the homes. And
Yes.
it kind of dovetails with what you're saying in that the situation is that you've got these new flood zone requirements that have you boost these homes up on stilts without basements. And it's basically saying in a sales market, those type of homes, even though they're large, are going to suffer a deficit because people want homes with space of a basement and not to be up on stilts. And so it shows that when you make those kinds of adjustments, it's just not feasible to sell those homes.
Right, because it carries the additional cost, but the revenue that you'd get would not be
Right, 'cause
full
the-
value because of.
The home prices are somewhat depressed because of that.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes,
Yes,
Commissioner?
just that, I just wanted to make it a condition that they have no outdoor activities, no outdoor music.
I think that seems reasonable. And I know they've identified their hours of operation, and we can consider other conditions, including signage, to ensure that, in fact, there won't be impacts on surrounding residential.
I think they also have a typo in their financials on pages 9, 17, and 32 concerning the number of residential piles. I think it should be 1,600 at $76.12 and not 600, because the math just says if it's 600 at $76.12 each, it's only 45,000, and it's supposed to be 121,000. So I think they might have left out a 1.
Okay. All right, so we can ask them to correct their financial. Okay.
Item number 9, 23313BZ, 2413 Avenue R, Brooklyn.
All right, questions and comments? They did provide an envelope drawing, so now they've changed the form of the building. It fits within the envelope. Any questions? All right, just want to clarify that the front and existing walls have a perimeter wall of 22 feet 1 inch. However, it seems that the enlargement is just 21 feet, and therefore they're not asking for a waiver. And so if they can just confirm that. Okay.
New cases, item number 10, 15513BZ, 1782, 1784 East 28th Street, Brooklyn.
This is an enlargement for a synagogue and the rabbi's apartment. There's an existing synagogue at this location. I know that the applicant has said that part of what the request before the board is to legalize the existing mikveh, but I just question whether we're legalizing just the mikveh or we're just legalizing the synagogue that's there today. It's not clear that that's legal. They do not have a C of O. One of the lots actually has a C of O for residential. These two were residential homes, and it's unclear how a synagogue could have been located there with the issue of the side yard. So maybe they can speak to that. But as part of this application, they're asking to enlarge it in order to accommodate their congregation. Questions and comments?
I had
Yes,
just
Susan.
a couple of comments. I was concerned about the second floor and whether or not there is room to give a little more space at the rear for, to set back. It just seems that that second floor is not necessarily used consistently in the way that they sort of portray it. It appears that it's probably used for the women during high holy days, but not necessarily during the week so much, and they only have an office up there. So there may be some room to be able to give a little more space at the rear. So I'd like them to take a look at that. And also, it wasn't clear to me exactly how they were calculating their occupancy, their square footage, whether it's based on an open space or is it people standing, sitting. It wasn't clear because it's going to change depending on how that space is used. So if they could give us more information about that, that would be helpful.
Okay. Yes.
I have a similar concern, basically has to do with the rear yard. While the applicant does say that, the extension would abut garages, it does to some extent, but it also abuts yards. And I was just wondering if that could be scaled back some.
I agree. I think it should be scaled back. And they looked at the minimum variance where they've set back 30 feet, but there's something anywhere in between 30 feet and the zero.
And the full building,
Yes,
right.
exactly. And I think they really should look to provide some space, even if it's 15 feet or 20 feet, and really show us that what you lose on the second floor. And I agree with Commissioner Hinkson. I think it's not a very efficient floor. There's an office that takes a portion of the rear yard encroachment, and it's unnecessary because they haven't really justified that. So I think there's definitely some places where this can be scaled down. Commissioner Montanez?
Yes, I thought in terms of the streetscape, it looked a little awkward to me. I was wondering if they could flip the rabbi's residence and keep it on the right side property. And that is currently attached to another building. It would minimize the construction on that side, and it would sort of, to me, make a more blended streetscape going towards the corner, which has a higher building.
Okay, all right. We can ask them to do that. I know the size of those two units seem very similar.
Identical, yes.
Right. Okay. Any other comments? Yes, Commissioner.
Did they state how many people are accommodated in the lesser variance women's gallery? Because that's not on the plans, and it's unclear to me what you lose up there.
Okay, we can ask them to specify that. All right.
Item number 11, 22513BZ, 810 Kent Avenue, Brooklyn.
All right, this is a case for a change of use for for residential and manufacturing district. I think the case is very weak. I think the board recognizes that there are two homes there that have been affected and have demolition orders or vacate orders, and they're unsafe and need to be torn down. But once they're torn down, you have a 5,000 square foot lot. And amongst the lots that we've seen, I think they have to really show that this is one of very few. They've done an elaborate analysis, which I think doesn't really get to the point. They said they looked at 331 properties, out of which 183 are less than 5,000 square feet, but out of the 183, 102 are occupied by residential. So that's fine, you can take that out of the equation. So you have about 81 lots that are 5,000 square feet or less. And remember, the ones that are less are even worse off than this site. And then they've done an elaborate analysis about why they think this site is unique. And I would just say one thing, that you can have a site that has unique features, but that doesn't necessarily mean they create a hardship. So by identifying a unique feature, in this particular case, adjacent to a church, I don't see how that's a hardship.
I
Just that-
completely agree.
And I think that their case really rests on these very odd things. They've talked about the fact that they're on a narrow street. Well, a lot of manufacturing sites are on narrow streets, and this is not a particularly narrow street. It's a typical narrow street at 60 feet
In that very neighborhood.
in that very neighborhood. So to screen off all the other sites because they're on wide streets is just, I think this board has never really accepted that argument. And so they have those two arguments, and then they have another one which is about adjacency, that where it could be used with another use. But this is a 5,000 square foot site, and I don't see a case here. Yes.
And not only is it a 5,000 square foot lot, but it is a previous adjacency. It is two merged lots that were once two 25 by 100 foot lots. So if anything, they should be including those other adjacent situations that are about 5,000 square feet, of which there are some if you look at his study. So I don't see how he can distinguish himself.
Right. Yes.
And also, they said that the buildings have to come down, the existing buildings, so then they're going to be left with a 5,000 square foot vacant site. And I agree with you. I don't think the factors that they've listed necessarily lead to a hardship.
I
Yes.
would agree. I mean, I did not see where the demolition of those buildings was such a hardship. I mean, you have to demolish buildings to build a new building, and they didn't really explain why filling in a cellar, especially buildings that take up just about a quarter of the site. So that means that 3/4 of the site is probably just fine. So they have, really no issue in that regard. I did not find that being adjacent to a church was a hardship.
Not in the borough of churches.
Not in the borough of churches. I wrote that as a comment. I was like, oh, really? And their adjacent neighbor is a commercial manufacturing building that seems to be doing just fine. So I don't think that they gave me any arguments for hardship whatsoever.
Okay,
In
yes,
fact, in the immediate area, it's mostly, except for the church, manufacturing or commercial uses. It's not residential at all.
Exactly. So, any other comments? I don't know what the applicant is going to give us, so I just don't want this to drag on unnecessarily. I think they've thrown in some arguments on the A finding. I think the board is not persuaded by any of them, so I'm not sure what else they can do. Okay.
Item number 12, 284-13BZ, 16842 Jamaica Avenue, Queens.
All right, questions and comments? I know this is a new building. I think it'd be helpful if they just gave us either the drawings or the zoning analysis for the DOB-approved plans, and just to make sure that it coincides with any requirements for the PCE.
I just.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Susan.
No, I just had a question, clearly facing Jamaica Avenue, that's very commercial, but on 92nd Road to the rear is very residential, and I know they're proposing a 24/7 operation, so I'd like to have maybe a little explanation of how the operation might spill over to the rear.
Okay.
That's exactly the same question that I wanted to ask. How does the new building interact with the residential character of 92nd Road?
Okay.
It's almost uniformly residential on 92nd.
Exactly.
Okay.
Item number 13, 316-13BZ, 210 Geralman Street, Brooklyn.
All right, questions and comments for this PCE?
We just got the landmark sign-offs. Is that right? Is this the right one?
Yes, this one
Yes.
requires landmark sign.
Yep. So,
Is the fire department going to require sprinklers or just the alarm, the fire alarm?
Okay, we can find out. We'll find out from the fire department. Any other questions? Okay.
Item number 14, 16-14BZ, 1648 Madison Place, Brooklyn.
All right, questions and comments? Commissioner Montanez?
Yes, they are asking for a minor increase, but the 10% has to be under a sloping roof,
Mm-hmm.
which they haven't shown. I don't believe they're using the attic, so they have to show us where they're getting the bonus
Okay,
floor
that's
area.
fine. We can ask them to show that on their plans. Are there any other comments? Okay.
Item number 15, 20-14BZ, 312 East 23rd Street, Manhattan.
All right, any questions or comments on this case? Seem very straightforward. Okay, good.
This concludes the executive session for May 12, 2014.